When I inherited my great-uncle's cabin, I thought it would be a good thing, a quick fix and flip. How wrong was I? This cabin turned out to be my own personal hell house, and turned out to be the death of me.
The dog's reflection. I never knew my great-uncle Raymond. He died before I was born, and my mother barely spoke of him. So when I inherited his old house in the country, it felt like a strange joke. Still, I wasn't about to turn down free property. I had a plan. Fix it up, sell it, move on. It was supposed to be simple, but nothing about that house was simple. And after the first week, I realized something wasn't right. Not with the house, not with me, and especially not with Max. Max had always been a good dog, a big, goofy German shepherd with more energy than sense. But after a few nights in the house, he started acting off. It was little things at first, not coming when I called, standing in doorways, watching me. His growl, deep, low, almost like a whisper, vibrated through the halls at night. Then the scratching started. At first, I thought it was mice, but the sound didn't come from inside the walls, it came from the mirrors. It happened on the 7th night. I had just finished brushing my teeth when I noticed Max in the hallway mirror. His reflection stood still. But he wasn't still. He was walking. His paws moved, but the reflection didn't move right. It was a fraction too fast, like it knew what he was going to do before he did it. A cold feeling crept up my spine. Max? He turned his head toward me, his real body, standing in the hallway. But in the mirror, he didn't. The reflection just kept staring ahead. I didn't sleep that night. Max curled up in his usual spot at the foot of my bed, but something about him felt wrong. His breathing was too steady, like he was pretending to be asleep. At some point, exhaustion won. I drifted off, only to wake to a soft, wet breath on my face. I jolted up. Max was inches from my face, his dark eyes locked onto mine. I swallowed hard. Max? His tail didn't wag, his ears didn't twitch. He just stared. Then, without blinking, he turned and walked out of the room. But in the mirror across from my bed, his reflection didn't move. I started avoiding mirrors. I covered them with sheets, but the scratching sounds only got worse. One night, I finally snapped. I ripped the cover off the bathroom mirror and shouted, "What do you want?" The house fell silent. Then, a whisper, faint, from inside the mirror. "Let him in." My stomach twisted. I backed away, but in the reflection, the bathroom door creaked open. And behind me, Max stood in the doorway, watching, waiting, and smiling. I knew then, that wasn't Max. Not anymore. Something else was in the house. Something using him, pretending. I needed to get out. I grabbed my keys, but as I turned, Max blocked the doorway. His eyes were all wrong, too dark, too human. And when he spoke, my world shattered. "You shouldn't have looked." I ran, down the stairs, toward the door, but it wouldn't open. Max followed, slow, patient. The house groaned. The mirrors shuddered. I grabbed a chair and smashed the nearest mirror. Glass rained down. For a second, there was silence. Then, a voice screamed from inside the shards. Not Max's, not mine, something else. Something trapped, something angry. Max's body jerked. He let out a sound between a growl and a cry, like something was being ripped out of him. Then, he collapsed. I didn't move for a long time. Max lay still. The house was quiet, and in the shattered remains of the mirror, I saw something move. A shadow, a shape, a figure watching me from inside the broken glass. Then, it smiled and vanished. Max woke up the next day. His tail wagged. His eyes were normal, like nothing had happened. But I knew better. I left the house that morning, put it on the market, never looked back. But sometimes, when I pass by a mirror, I still see it, the thing in the reflection, watching, waiting, and smiling. It had been almost 2 years since then, and I still saw the things in the mirror. It had followed me. At least it never tried to harm me again. I just needed to avoid the mirrors at home. Knowing that it had followed me, I had no problem selling the house to a small family planning on opening a farm there. Oh, how I wish I knew better. Part 2. Told from Lily's perspective. Change to another voice. The house was supposed to be a new beginning. That's what Dad said. It's a fresh start, he told us as we pulled into the long, overgrown driveway. He sounded hopeful. But even then, I felt it. Something about the house felt off, like it was watching us. And soon I'd realize the house wasn't just watching, it was waiting. It started small, little things I could ignore, like how our mirrors never felt right. Something about my reflection always seemed delayed. Or how Rose would sometimes pause too long when brushing her hair, staring at herself in the glass. Then, one night, I saw it. The thing I couldn't ignore. We were in the bathroom, getting ready for bed, both of us brushing our teeth. Rose turned to spit into the sink, but her reflection didn't. I froze. My heart hammered. Rose straightened and wiped her mouth. A second later, her reflection moved. A full second too late. I wanted to believe I imagined it, but the next time I looked, her reflection was staring at me, and Rose wasn't. The next morning, I told myself it was nothing, I was imagining things. But then, at breakfast, I saw it again. Rose was eating cereal across from me, scrolling through a magazine. But in the window behind her, I saw her reflection, and it was grinning, too wide, too still, like it knew something I didn't. I choked on my toast. Rose looked up. "Geez, Lily, you okay?" I swallowed, my hands shaking. I didn't answer, because behind her, her reflection was still smiling. That night, I couldn't sleep. I felt watched. At some point I must have drifted off, because I woke to the sound of footsteps. Slow, soft. I sat up. The hall light was on. Rose stood in my doorway. "Rose?" I whispered. She didn't answer. She just stood there. Something about her posture felt wrong, too stiff, too deliberate. Then, without a word, she turned and walked away. I hesitated, then got up to follow her, but when I reached the hallway, her bedroom door was still closed. I swallowed hard. And then I turned toward the hallway mirror. Rose was still there, standing, watching me, even though the hall was empty. The next morning, I was done pretending. I needed to talk to Rose. "Hey," I said, standing in her doorway, "have you noticed anything weird?" She raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" I hesitated. "Like, with the mirrors?" She frowned, then sighed. "Lily, if you're scared of this house, just say it," I swallowed. "I'm not scared, I just..." She rolled her eyes and stood up. Then she turned toward the vanity mirror in the corner of her room and stared at herself. "I don't see anything wrong," she said flatly. Then she smiled. "Too wide. Too wrong." The hairs on my arm stood up. I took a step back. "Rose?" I whispered. Her real body turned toward me, but in the mirror, her reflection didn't. Then it spoke. "Let me in." I ran. Out of her room, down the stairs. I didn't stop until I reached the kitchen, heart hammering. I needed to tell someone. Mom? Dad? Anyone. Then I stopped, because hanging on the kitchen wall was an old mirror, and the moment I looked at it, the scratching started, a soft rhythmic scraping sound from inside the glass. My breath hitched. The mirror shuddered, and then a shape pressed against the other side. Something trying to get through. I staggered back, and in my reflection, I saw Rose standing behind me, even though I was alone, and she was smiling. That night, I locked my bedroom door. Rose knocked once. Soft, almost playful. "Good night, Lily," she whispered through the wood. Her voice echoed too much, like she wasn't standing there at all, like she was somewhere else, somewhere waiting. I stayed awake until dawn, and when I finally opened my door, I found a mirror leaning against it. My own reflection wasn't smiling. but behind me, Rose's was. I need to get out. I need to take Rose and leave this place, because whatever is in the mirrors, it remembers me. It wants us. And I don't think my sister is my sister anymore, because sometimes, when I call her name, she doesn't blink, doesn't breathe, she just smiles, and when I turn away, I see her reflection watching me, even when she's not there. I barely remembered Angela Harper. Dad mentioned her once. A woman who had owned the house before us said she only stayed for a short time before selling it and disappearing. Now I knew why. Whatever was happening to Rose, Angela had seen it before. She was the only one who could help. If she was still alive, I found Angela's name in an old property record. She was listed at an apartment complex 2 towns over. That night, after Mom and Dad went to bed, I packed a bag, grabbed my bike, and rode into town. I didn't tell Rose where I was going, because I knew. She wasn't really Rose anymore, and if she found out what I was doing, she'd try to stop me. Angela's apartment was small and quiet. When she answered the door, I could tell she hadn't been sleeping. Dark circles hung under her eyes. Her expression was careful, like she was expecting someone else. "Can I help you?" she asked. I swallowed hard. "I live in the old house," I said quickly. Angela's face changed. She didn't speak, didn't blink. Then she stepped aside. "Come in?" Angela listened as I told her everything. The mirrors, the scratching, Rose's reflection moving on its own. I expected her to call me crazy, but she didn't. Instead, she stood and walked to the mirror in her hallway. Her hands trembled as she pulled a blanket over it. Then she turned back to me, her voice cold. "You should have left the moment you saw it." Angela took a deep breath. "That house. It isn't just haunted," she said. "It's a trap." I felt my stomach twist. "A trap for what?" She hesitated. Then, "Have you ever seen your reflection move before you do?" A chill crawled up my spine. I nodded. Angela looked me straight in the eyes. "That means it's almost ready." "Ready for what?" I whispered. Angela's voice dropped lower. "To take your place." Angela pulled out a box of old papers. She spread them across the table. Old newspaper clippings, missing persons reports, photos of people who had lived in the house before. Their stories were all the same. First, their reflections moved wrong. Then, their mirrors stopped showing them at all. Then one day, they vanished. No bodies, no explanations. Just gone. And in every case, after they disappeared, a new family moved in. I felt sick. The house didn't just haunt people, it swallowed them. And now it had chosen Rose. Angela rubbed her face, looking more exhausted than ever. "You don't have much time," she said. "Once the house finishes the trade, it'll be too late." I swallowed hard. "How do we stop it?" She hesitated. Then, "You have to break the reflection," I frowned. "What does that mean?" She exhaled sharply. "Your sister's already halfway taken. Her reflection isn't hers anymore. If you want to save her, you need to separate her from it." "How?" Angela's expression darkened. "You burn the mirrors." I raced back home. The sun was just starting to rise, casting long shadows across the fields. When I crept through the front door, the house was quiet. Too quiet. Then, a voice. Soft, familiar. "Lily?" I turned. Rose stood in the hallway. Her eyes were dark. Her smile was too wide. She took a slow step forward. "You've been talking to her, haven't you?" I felt my blood run cold. Angela was right. That wasn't Rose anymore. I grabbed the gasoline from the shed, a box of matches from the kitchen. Rose stood in the doorway, watching me. "You don't want to do that," she whispered. Her voice echoed, like there were two of her speaking at once. I swallowed hard. "You're not my sister." She tilted her head. Then she smiled. "You're right," she whispered. Then, every mirror in the house shattered at once. Glass rained down, the air shook, and in the broken shards, the reflection crawled out. I didn't think, I just ran, dumped gasoline across the hallway. The air filled with the harsh chemical smell. The reflection, the thing wearing Rose's face, took a step forward. Her voice shifted, turning into something else. A chorus of whispers. "You can't stop it!" I struck a match, and through it, the fire spread fast. Smoke filled the hallways. The reflections screamed. I grabbed the real Rose, the body she had left behind, and dragged her outside. We collapsed in the dirt, coughing. The house groaned. Glass shattered from every window, and as I looked back, I saw them. Figures in the flames, the ones who had been taken before, watching, waiting, until finally the house collapsed, and the whispers stopped. Rose doesn't remember anything. She woke up after the fire, confused and weak, but normal. It worked. We destroyed the house, destroyed whatever lived inside it. But sometimes, when I catch my reflection in the mirror, I swear I see it. The other me, standing just a little too still, watching, waiting. Because some things never really leave. They just find a new place to hide.